Good morning, Rabbi Isai. Live from Park City, Utah. So it goes like this. So we're talking about like 20 lines from the bottom. Again, Rav is the one who says that if a Yisrael does kmitza, he takes, this is the bowl of flour. If a Yisrael takes the 3 fingers worth from this bowl, it's no good. But if he puts it back into the bowl, it's good. The Mishnah mentions a whole list of other people. You have a Einen, you have a Mechusik Kapara, you have a Tvul Yoim, etc., etc. So says the Gemara, Elotaim Edashmin Rav. It's because Rav said that you can put it back in. I would think that the only thing you can put back in is if you do it with your left hand. Do your left hand, you can put it back in and start over again. But what if a Yisrael does it? What if a Noinen does it? You can't. That's what I would think. But Tanya, but how could that be? It's not true. Bemseira says the whole list is all kosher if you put it back in. V'tanya, and another thing, it says v'kamatz misham. It says in the pasuk v'kamatz misham, from there. From the place that the feet of the Yisraelim stand. If you messed up, you did it with your left hand, put it back in, start over with the right. So he learns it differently. From the same bowl that you did kmitza with your left, do it over again. It's not a problem. Bekiv in the cross stomach sivba, mali small, mali shar psulim. So it's obvious that the pasuk is not referring only to the left hand versus the right. The pasuk could be talking about a Yisrael and an Ayin and a Tvul Yom and Chuzuk Kippurim. And Rav. So what's Rav coming to tell us? Chomatz vafilu kiddush. When can you return it? In all situations, even if you did the kmitza and put it into the smaller second vessel, which gives kedusha to that kmitza. You did kmitza with your right hand. Well, you're Yisrael. You did kmitza with your right hand. Put it into the small vessel. It becomes kaddish. I could take that, dump it back into the original bowl, and start all over again. It's a big chiddush. And this comes to say differently, to exclude these tanoim that say the Sanya Rabbi Yosi ben Yason, Rabbi Yehuda Nachtim Amru, Rabbi Yosi, the son of Yosi ben Yason, and Rabbi Yehuda Nachtim say. By the way, Rabbi Yehuda Nachtim, I heard once that he's not pshat that he's a baker. Pshat is that his Torah was so beautiful, like fresh bagels, but he wasn't necessarily a baker. They say differently when we just said. We just said that even if it goes into a second kli, you can still use it. No. When can you use the original kmitza? Is only if you didn't put it in a second kli. Like kiddush. Ava kiddush, but if you put it in a second kli, pasal, that's too late. You can't do anything over. And some say komatzin kiddush loy. Dafka, if you did that in Rav, komatzin kiddush loy. Not like we said before that if you put it in a kli, that it's okay. Rav said no. If you put it in a kli, it's not good. Keman kanetanoy, and he fits right in with Yosi, Rabbi Yosi ben Yosem, Rabbi Yehuda Nachtoim. They go hand in hand. That you could reuse the kmitza. If you don't put it into the klishars, you just put it directly back into the original bowl. But if you put it into a second bowl, it becomes pasul. Keman kanetanoy lafukim tanakama. What is kmitza? So you're able to bring, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you're able to bring a gift. Usually it's a gift to Rebbeinu Shalom. You put it on the mizbech. It's made out of flour. Sometimes you add a little oil, you add a little frankincense, levina. Sometimes it's plain, it's just flour. The procedure is as follows. Let me just show you. Here it goes. This is an older AI video. It gets better. We have an oive. As a symbol of our divinity. I don't like that. I'm just muted. No, I think he's done speaking. Hey, how are you? Grab a seat. Shavua Tov. Here, you have a sefer. No, that's not it. Here, passing both of those. You're probably going to want to see the screen. So, what you saw over here, You might have been distracted for a second, but basically, the kohen sticks his hand into the flour, and with his three fingers, he grabs flour. That's a mincha. Then whatever you have to add, you add. Sometimes you put the oil on the bottom, put the flour on top, then more oil, then the frankincense. But this right over here, these three fingers worth, that is the kmitza, that goes onto the mizbeach. That is the what you maktir, that's the carbon. The rest, the kohen gets to eat afterwards. Okay. So knowing that, Rav says, that's like 10 lines from the top. Rav says that if a Yisrael does the kmitza, it has to be done by a kohen, but let's say Yisrael jumped in and he did the kmitza, then you just return it right back to the bowl. You put the kmitza right back to the bowl. So we had a machlokes exactly what's going on here. What happens if he doesn't put it in the bowl? He puts it in the second bowl. Now, I don't know if you noticed. Here, let's go back over here. Okay, you see now he's taking the kmitza. What does he do with it? He puts it into a second vessel. It's in one klisharis. This is the first vessel has gedusha, and then he takes the three fingers worth and he puts it into a second vessel. There's a machlokes. Once you put it into the second vessel, can you return it to the first one? Once you take the kmitza from here, Rav says, even if Yisrael takes it and he messes up, he can put it right back and then let the kohen start all over again. But if you put it into the second smaller vessel, you can't do that. That's one shita. Machlokes. So now we're holding 5 lines from the bottom. Navavam in the base. Maskiv lo Rav Nachman. What exactly do they hold? When the Yisrael takes the 3 fingers worth, that's considered one of the 4 essential avodas. Like when you shech the carbon in the base of Mikdash, the shchita, kabbalah, haylacha, zrika. It's the essential avodas that a kohen does. What about the kmitza? If you hold that putting your hand in and grabbing 3 fingers is part of the avodah, so who cares if you put into another kli or not? Oh, correct. Thank you. I was giving shir here without people, and I skipped around, and it wasn't good. Then I had to go back and fix it. So thank you. If it's considered an avodah, so what difference is it if he put into a kli or not? By him putting his hand into the kli and going like this, he did an avodah, and it should be possible. And if it doesn't count for anything, so then he dumps it into a second vessel. So what good is it? Why is that a problem? Why would you say that putting into a second kli ruins it? In fact, it is considered avodah. So he says something very interesting, that it's a combination. It's not a complete avodah. It's let's say 50%. By you putting your hand in and grabbing it is 50%. The second part is when you put it into the kli. That's the second 50%. So it is an avodah, but it's not a complete avodah. Therefore, when you by Yisrael putting his hand in, he did 50%. It's not possible yet. But when he dumps it into the second kli, then he finishes it off. Boom. Then it becomes a complete avodah. Then it becomes possible. You can't use it again. Yachis, as the Gemara, afilu lo kiddush. V'chim yahadir le lekoymes top of Zayin Amud Aleph. V'chim yahadir le lekoymes leduchtei ligdosh. Here, let's say he takes flour from here. This is a golden vessel. This has gedusha. This is a klisharis. So he goes and he takes that amount. He did 50% of avodah. Then he goes, puts it right back to where he started. And we said we can use it. How could he use it? This is a klisharis. By him putting it back in here, it was mekadesh it. He gave it gedusha, and now he ruined it. So Taisus asks, when you put it back in here, where does it fall? It falls on top of the flour. So if it falls back on the flour, how could it have gedusha? In order for it to have gedusha, it has to fall into the vessel. It didn't fall into the vessel; fell into the other flour. So Taisus says that's the famous concept of min b'minoi and echaisis. Just throwing it out there. When you have 2 items that are the same. The one are the same, it's flour and flour, then there's no chatzitza. So it's as if when you put the kmitza back in the bowl on top of flour, it's as if it hit the bottom of the kli because the flour that it fell on is not going to provide a barrier, separation between the kli and that. I just thought it's an interesting place. So the question is, let's go back to the question to understand the answer. The question is, when the Yisrael, we're talking about a guy who's puzzled. It's a Yisrael or a person that lost a close relative that day, an Einan, a Tful Yom, Chuzak Kippurim, all these people that are puzzled doing the Avodah, they put their hand in, and then Rav says, just put it back and start over. You don't have to throw out all the flour, start. Why? When you put it back in, you made it Kaddish, it should be no good. When you put it in, you didn't have intent to have the Klisharis make it Kaddish. You have to have intent. Everything in Judaism is in the mind. Everything. When you do a mitzvah, you have to think. If you don't think, no good. You could think, you could have the same action, take the same thing. If you thought one way, it's good, the other way not. Over here also, you put it back into the kli. If you don't have that intent that I want it to be kaddish, it doesn't happen. Hamadas mikachin. So what do you tell me? But if you did have intent that it should be kaddish, it would become kaddish. But if so, how come it is? Rish Lakish once asked Rabbi Yochanan, can a klisharis take something that's puzzle and make it kaddish so you can put it on the mizbeach? Rabbi Yochanan told Rish Lakish that it doesn't make kedusha. Why not? Over here you say that by putting in this non-good kmitza that was done by Yisrael, it makes it kaddish if you had the right intent. So he says, you have to make a distinction. What Rabbi Yochanan was saying is that it's not kaddish enough to put it on the mizbeach, but it is kaddish enough to make it pasul. Rav Amim Ramar, kigon shechziroi lebisa gedusha. Oh, so you know what? Let me just show you what Yoshi did. Here's a bisa gedusha. You guys see it? Bisa gedusha, meaning it's overflowing. There's a big heap over there, and therefore what? That's why there's no kedusha, because it's outside of the kli. The kli, in order for a kli to make it kaddish, it has to be within the rim. It can't be above the rim. So the Gemara says, "Oh, if that's the case, how did he do kmitza? He took kmitza from the big heap, which is not in a kli, which is not a good kmitza." Ella, so we have to retract a little bit. What happened was he put it back, and it was very full, like this. It was all the way to the top. Okay. Vikiv in the comments lay of the guma. But wait a minute. If it was all the way to the top, by him, here, I'm going to demonstrate. Better not get on my tie and suit. Okay, so this is the flour, yeah? He puts his hand in like this, straight in, and takes 3 fingers worth, like that. So what happened? You guys see the hole? So there's a hole. So when he puts it back in, he put it right back into the hole. So it's great. Then it's in the kli. It has to be below the rim. So you're telling me, oh, it's not below the rim because it's very full. Okay, but when he did his kmitza, he went like this. He made a giant hole. And then when he put it back, Rav said, put it back. So he puts it right back into the hole. So what does Gemara answer? Oh, here's a hole. Where it says, Vikiv in the comments lay over like guma. He made a big hole. He put it right back into the hole. I got to move this. Oh, says the Gemara. So the Gemara says, look, he put it right over here on the side. Oh, you see? This is no good because this is above the rim. Yeah? He didn't put it in the hole. We're talking about that he took out, the kmitza was good. Why? Because it was level. He did a good kmitza, but he didn't put it back in the hole. If he put it back in the hole, it wouldn't be a problem, it would be kaddish. The problem is that he put it back on top. And then what? I'm going to nervous to do it. I'm going to do it for the share. If it falls on me, it's great. The Gemara says he did like this, and he shook it up. You see, now it went below the rim, sort of, and that's okay. Now, logically speaking, what would you say? By him shaking it like this, did he put it back in the hole, or it happened by itself? What do you say? He shook it up and went into the hole. I would think also it's his ma'asiyad, but Gemara says no. Look what the Gemara says. The Gemara uses very strong language. The nasa kimi shechziro yakoif. It's as if a monkey put it back. Here we actually have a little bit of a thing, nothing major. In other words, you didn't put the flour into the hole. You shook it like this, and it kind of, it's like an after effect. I don't exactly understand the svara, I have to tell you the truth, but that's what Gemara says. Says Gemara, Amalei Reb Yirmiyah Reb Zera. I have a question. It's actually a proof, not a question. What are you asking me? You're saying when you take that mincha with your fingers and you put it back in, the kli should make it kaddish on the spot and actually ruin it. Why? Because I'm a Yisrael, I'm not a kohen, I have no right to take the kmitza. By me putting it back in here, it should be ruined because the fact is this kli is a kli sharis, it's a golden kli, it's a vessel of the Beis HaMikdash, has kedusha, and anything you put in it becomes kaddish. So me, the Yisrael, I put it back in, it becomes kaddish, it should ruin it. So he says, oh, I have a chap. Maybe this vessel is on a table. It's on the floor. A kohen is not holding it. And I put it back in, so it didn't have any kedusha. Elamai, you see from the fact that the Gemara didn't answer that's not a problem. That this vessel doesn't need to be held. You prove from here, you could do kmitza from a kohen doesn't have to hold it. That's what he holds. You actually touched upon a question that we had. This is like an agadta. We're going into a story here. It's almost like ADD, sort of. Rav Shalom Shvadran always says, and I use this all the time, this idea, when you have a story in the middle of learning, you just say it, right? Like Hashem gave you a story, don't worry about it. You're in the middle of a sentence, you just go. This is exactly what happens here. Look how it works. He says, this is a question that we had. The Rebbe Avimi Tonim Menachos Be'Rav Chizda. Because Rebbe Avimi was learning Menachos, this Masechta, by Rav Chizda. Ask the Gemara, before we even go any further, Vavimi Be'Rav Chizda Tani? Avimi is the Rebbe. How's Avimi learning from his Talmud, Rav Chizda? Rav Chizda once said, Kulfei Tovei Balei, interesting words, I got beat up physically or verbally from Avimi, my Rebbe, Alada Shmaita, because I forgot something in learning. The what? It says, if the orphans have to pay back like a debt, and we want to take some of the inheritance and sell it so they can pay back the debt, we want them to get the highest price, most value for whatever they're selling. So what do? We announce it for 30 days, or we announce it for 60 days, Sheni v'Chamishi, only on Mondays and Thursdays. So we do that for 60 days, it adds up to 18. Yeah? So the way you could understand it is, let's say if you're doing Chazarah on Gemara, on anything, if you took this daf and you reviewed it 10 times in a row in one day, it would be much less effective than doing it like every other day or once a week. 5 times once a week is much better than 10 times in one day. So the same thing over here. If they announce it 30 days in a row, it's not as powerful as announcing it 18 times over the course of 60 days. But now we're like smack in the middle of something. Rav Chisda got smacked by Avimi because he forgot this halacha. So you see, the Rav Chisda is actually the student. So the Gemara explains, So how is it possible that Avimi learned Menachos by Rav Chisda? Says Gemara, Avimi Masechta is Akra is Akrele. Avimi forgot the entire Masechta of Menachos. V'asa kamed Rav Chisda lat Kure Gemara. He went to Rav Chisda to learn it. I thought it's fascinating. When Rav Chisda forgot a little shot, he got a smack from him, and he forgot the entire Masechta. He didn't get beat up by Rav Chisda. He went to learn from Rav Chisda. Okay. So he goes to learn from him. As the Gemara, he's the Rebbe. You should tell Rav Chisda, come to me and teach me Masechtas Menachos. Savar, I think this is wonderful. This line right over here. Savar, hachim istayim milsatfei. By me going to Rav Chisda, embarrassing myself, walking over there, whatever it is, I'll have more hatzlacha in this learning. Says the Gemara, Pogabei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman bumps into Avimi. How do you do kmitza? He points literally like here. You see that bowl right over there, like that. That's how you do kmitza. Could I use something like that that's on the floor? No. I was saying that's a great kli. I didn't say like that on the floor. A kohen has to lift it. Okay, so now I take the flour and I want to put it into a kli to make it. I brought from home. I brought a bag of flour. I want to put it in a kli. How do I do that? He put it here. He pointed to that kli. So you ask him, could you use something that's on the floor? No, the magbelei kain. We're talking, of course, that a kain is holding it. Now it comes out that you need 3 kohanim. You need 1 kohen to hold the big kli, another kohen to stick his hand in and do kmitza, and a 3rd kohen to hold the 2nd kli. Right? Because you take the kmitza, you put it into a smaller vessel. So you need 3. So what's the big deal? So you have 3. But every morning and every afternoon in the Beis HaMikdash, 7 days a week, 365, they brought a tamid. How many kohanim do you need for that? You need 13. Okay, so big deal. So you have 3. Well, why is 3 such a big deal? When you take the kmitza and you put it into the vessel, when you take the vessel of the kmitza and you bring it to the mizbech, putting it onto the mizbech, that's the mission of Pigel. We're not going to go into it. That a kohen, as he's doing one of these things, the essential avodas, he could have in mind that's going to eat it in 3 days from now. By doing so, he ruins it because that's Pigel. You could only eat it for a certain amount of time, not 3 days. But once you think about it, it's over. And if he would eat it, he would get karas for that. How come it says kmitza, moilech, maktir? It doesn't say anything about the kohen holding it. Says Gemara, I'll tell you why. Of course you have to hold it. Tana said avodas not God. Said the kohanim. We're talking about the essential avodas. We're not talking about the lighter things like the kohen holding it. This is the exact question that we just had until now. What's the halacha doing kmitza from a kli that's on the ground and the kohen is not holding it? Look what they do inside the Beis HaMikdash. When referring to the lechem apanim. So it says, Arba kohanim nechnasim, shnayim biyadam shnei zdarim. Each kohen holds 6 breads. So that's 2 kohanim holding 6 breads, that's 12 breads. Ushnayim biyadam shnei bezichim. And 2 other kohanim hold the 2 bezichim, which contain the levina. You can see the 2 kohanim holding 6 breads back there. So 4 remove everything, and 4 put it back on. Oh, so now in this process right over here, right, these guys, this one right over here, when you have the 8 people taking the bread, putting the bread, how come it doesn't mention about another 2 people lifting up the table? It doesn't say anything that you have to lift the table. Isn't it similar to kmitza where a kohen has to hold the kli while you're doing the kmitza? Shouldn't kohanim have to hold the table while they put the bread in? And Rashi explains that the bezichin, those spoonfuls of levina, is what allows the kohanim to eat from the bread. So they're the mater. It's what we call a mater. When you burn those, then you're able to eat the bread. It's the same thing, says Rashi, when it comes to kmitza. When I go like this, I put my hand in there, take three, then allows the kohanim to eat the rest of the flour. So they're similar. So the Gemara says, you're right. Maybe a kohen does have to hold it. So Rashi says over here something interesting. Says Rashi, the reason why it's not mentioned, maybe, says Rashi, or explaining the Gemara, the reason why lifting the table is not so important, it wasn't part of it, because it's not an avodah chashuva. It's an avodah, but not an important one, so it's not on the list. But maybe in a chanami, a kohen does have to lift up the table. Says Gemara, oh, wait a minute. Midami on Amud Aleph, when we said that's not part of the list because we're only talking about avodah, we're not talking about the kohanim. Great. Over here, we're counting how many kohanim there are. You're going through numbers. There's 8. 4 do this, 4 do that. Don't you think if there's a ninth kohen lifting the table, shouldn't you mention him? Imisa, listen to Magbia. You see that you can do kmitza when the kli is on the karka, on the ground, on the table. You don't need a kohen to hold it. And that's how we started off the sugya. Amarava, 6 lines from the top. This we already established. It's so simple that if the bowl of flour is on the floor, on a table, the kohen could do the kmitza. You don't need another kohen to hold it. Why? We already proved it from the shulchan, that there's nobody lifting the table over there, and they took off the frankincense from the shulchan without a kohen holding it. Next, when I go home and I bring a bag of flour from my pantry and I bring it to the Beis Hamikdash, I need to make a kaddish. Even though I say, by the way, when I say that this bag of flour is going to be a mincha, so it does become kaddish a little bit, it becomes Kedushas Bedek Habayis. I want to make it really kaddish, I need to put it into a klisharis. So how do I do that? I could put it into a klisharis that's on the ground. A kohen doesn't have to be holding it. We find the same thing about the shulchan. You take the bread, you put it into the shulchan. A kohen doesn't have to be holding it. By Rava, but there's something that I don't know. Kiddush kohen etzmai. What's the process again? There's a large bowl. I put my hand in the large bowl, take 3 fingers worth, and put it into the small bowl. That small bowl, does a kohen have to hold it or not? What's the question? Do I learn it from the rest of the things of mincha? We just established I could do the kmitza, and I could put the flour even though the bowl is on the ground. So too, the second bowl could be on the ground. Or did I learn from blood? We had the whole last Masech Zevachim is talking all about this. That when the kohen in the Beis Hamikdash shechs the animal, blood comes squirting out of the neck. You have to grab the blood with a klisharis. As to go into klisharis, and that blood is the final avodah. You bring it to the mizbech and you sprinkle it on the mizbech. That a kohen has to be holding. You can't have a kli sitting on the ground grabbing the blood. A kohen has to be holding the kli. That we learn from psukim. So the question is, and what is the question? I wish I had this, but I don't. I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. This process of taking kmitza from flour mimics a carbon. A carbon has 4 avodas: shchita, kabbalah, receiving the blood; halacha, moving the blood to the mizbech; zrika, pouring the blood on the mizbech. So too, by a kmitza, we have the mincha. We have the kmitza, which is similar to shchita. We have you taking that kmitza, putting it into a small vessel. That's kabbalah. That's like receiving the blood. Kabbalah. Then the kohen takes that small vessel, moves it to the mizbech. That's halacha. Then he puts it on the mizbech. That's aktara. That's like zrika aktara. So hadar pashta midam yalfinan. So this idea of putting the kmitza into a bowl is similar to Kabbalah of dam. And dam, we know that a kohen has to be holding the kli when he receives the blood. So too the kmitza. As the Gemara, the Rava really say this. This kmitza, he takes flour with 3 fingers. He puts 1.5 fingers worth in one vessel, 1.5 fingers worth in another vessel. Is that good? Rava says it's good. The problem is, if Rav is the one who compares the putting of the kmitza into the small vessel, like the blood, receiving the blood in the small vessel. He should learn from blood, and by blood you can't put half and half. You need to put all the blood into one vessel. Says the Gemara, Rav Mahi, you're right. He says that when he agrees to Rav Nachman that if you put a kmitza half and half into 2 kelim, it's no good. He regretted that. How do you know that you can't make blood kaddish halfway? You put half of the blood in one kli and half in another kli. This is by the para aduma. Kiddush like Kiddush. This is a little bit of an exaggeration, but what they would do is they would take the hysops here and they would dunk it into the paraduma water. It's mixed water. It's not that violent, but yeah. And they would spray the guy with the. So now what happens? There's more? Uh-oh. What happens if this kli doesn't have enough water? You have to use 2 kalim. So, like Kiddush. You see, by the paraduma, it doesn't work. You need to put all the water into one vessel. What about the zachatas, the inner chatas they do on Yom Kippur, let's say? What about blood? Everything about the paraduma we know is halacha. It's a halacha. That's it. There's no. The halacha Moshe Messina tells us you have to do it so, and you can't learn anything else from it. Or perhaps no. By paraduma it says the word v'tava b'mayim, and it teaches us that you have to have enough water. You can't use 2 different vessels. It has to all be in one. So too by blood it says the same wording. So mela, I would know that you can't use 2 vessels. It has to be in one. No, you should know that if you have, this is how we know it, that at the end of the day, if you put the blood, the Kabbalah Sadam, you did it in 2 different vessels, it's not considered a good Kabbalah Sadam. Amarava, Tani Namehachi, Vetaval, Veloy Misapik. Vetaval, when the Kayan, here, let me show you the Kayan doing, in the Heichal, on Yom Kippur we say Achas v'achas, so that's this right over here. He takes blood, dunks his finger in the blood, and pours it on the floor, 7 in a row. Now, we're going to be talking about it. You cannot do misapik. You can't do this. You can't take from the blood that's on the edges. You got to stick it right into the blood. Badam, shi'abadam, shir tefillah mikara. You have to have all the 7 drops of blood in that one vessel. You can't have one vessel that has 3 drops and the other vessel 4. That doesn't work. All of them have to be in one. Min adam shebe'inyan. What does that mean? We'll see in a second. It says you need both, to dunk and blood. Because Rahman of a taval, that you have to dunk your finger in there. I would think that even if you don't have enough blood for all 7, because Rahman of Adam, you need in that one vessel, you need all 7 sprinkles. Because Rahman of Adam, I feel misapik. I would think that you could go around like this, like the yogurt. Because Rahman of a taval, no, you have to dunk it in there. What does it mean? We read these words, but we didn't understand what it meant. Min adam shebe'inyan. What does that mean? It's interesting. Shiraim shebe'etzba means that when you put your finger into the blood and you sprinkle, you think that you could go again. You have enough blood to do it a second time. No. In fact, and I saw in the art scroll, but not in our Gemara, so I have to ask my chavrusa why not in our Gemara. The art scroll says you have to wipe your finger down every time between dipping in. That's what the art scroll says. I don't know where they got it from. I don't see it in Rashi. In our Gemara, our translation doesn't have it. But if it's true they have to wipe it down, it's a problem. We should put it in there. Talmidim said in the name of Rav Amram, again, we're talking about the inner chatas. And this is an interesting halacha we discussed a lot in Zevachim. And that is, if some of the blood from the carbon goes on the kayan's garment, there's a chiyuv to wash it. You must wash the garment. So he says, he was in the middle of doing the hazah and it got on his garment. Imachli, he's a ton kibos. If it's before he did any of the sprinkles, you have to wash your garment. But once he's done, ain't ton kibos. It's not right anymore, so you don't have to wash the clothing. But let's understand. It says, my lav actually gomar zasai. What does it mean? There's two types. They finished completely. There's before he finished and after he finished. Oh, you see from here that if he didn't finish, then the shiraim on the finger are good enough to continue on. Why are you telling me you can't continue? Why are you telling me you have to dunk in every single time? So the Gemara says, it means we're talking about each individual sprinkle. You could break it down to 7 different sprinkles. On each and every one, you dunked your finger in, and then it got your clothing dirty. Then you have to wash your clothing. Once you went like this, you sprinkled it on that individual one, then you don't have to wash your clothing. The way it worked is they would take their hand and wipe their hand down on the paraduma. Why? Because later on they're going to burn the entire paraduma. Like so. Let's see. I think we have it over here. So we want everything to be burned, including all the blood that's left over. We burn it. How do you burn it? The kind goes, it's kind of nasty. Take the bloody hand and go like this on the para. I'll tell you why I think it's nasty. I'll show you in a second. Seems like dafka when you're completely finished, but if not, you don't wipe your hand down. No, you're right. It's a good deal what you just said, because it seems like in between fingers, you could continue doing sprinkles from fingers. No, if you finished, wipe your hand down on the cow. But if you didn't finish completely, you must wash your finger down, like we were saying, that you have to wipe your finger down. I mean, maybe that's where the Ariel got it from, right over here. You have to wipe your finger off in between each and every. Says Gemara, I understand why you have to wipe your hand down on the cow. You should burn the cow. So Rashi says something very interesting. How are you going to wipe your finger down? It says Rashi, because you're not by the cow. The cow is down there, you're on top. Seems like you're doing the sprinkles in a different place, says Rashi. So why I'm going to make you go in between each one, you have to do 7 sprinkles. You're going to go up and down the mountain. This is Har HaZeisim, right? Where do you do this? This right over here is on Har HaZeisim, facing the Heichal, the door of the Heichal. So I'm going to make you go up and down. We in Zevachim had a different pshat. Rashi said a different pshat. So he says if you're going to wipe your finger on the cow, it's going to look like this. Kids, you're going to get your finger all dirty. And then they skip over here. Amar Abayo, Bisfas Mizrog. How do you clean you're right. You don't wipe it down on the cow, you wipe it down on the vessel, on the edge of the vessel. Kifayr is a lashon of wiping it down. Rabbi Isai, have a wonderful day.
Merit the schus of spreading Torah throughout the world. Sponsor a shir today. MDYsponsor.com or sponsor at MDYDaf.com.